So why don't I just get started by introducing Mike. I think a lot of you in our audience are already quite good friends, but for those of you who don't know Mike, he has served as the rare book librarian at the Lillian Goldman Law Library at the Yale Law School since 2006. He's also on the faculty of the Rare Book School, part of the University of Virginia, where he teaches a week-long intensive summer course called Law Books, History and Connoisseurship. He came to Yale from the University of Texas at Austin, where he was head of special collections for 14 years. And he is also co-author of Law Pictures Books, the Yale Law Library Collection, which was the catalog of a major exhibition at the Grolier Club. Also won the 2008 Joseph L. Andrews Legal Literature Award from the American Association of Law Libraries. So without further ado, Mike, I will turn the stage over to you, and we can learn why you went looking for pictures in all the wrong places.
Very good. Great. Thank you, Kate. And I just want to thank Kate Zullo for organizing this event. She's been great to work with. Thank you, Kate, so much. It's been a great pleasure. One little thing, this is probably since the pandemic began, this is the second time I've worn a tie and the first time I've worn a suit, a coat and tie. So this is a big event. So thank you for this opportunity. Also, I just want to mention, I'm going to be retiring from Yale at the end of April. So this might be the last time I give a presentation as a Yale Law Librarian. So it's a great honor to be doing this for the Litchfield Historical Society. And before I begin, I just want to say something about the Litchfield Historical Society. They punch way above their weight class. Kate mentioned the digitization project we did with them on the Litchfield Law School notebooks. We have the largest collection of them, of these notebooks. They're very important in the history of American law. Litchfield, I believe, has the second largest. And we would have enjoyed doing a project with them just on the basis of the collection. But what really made it meaningful and a great project for us is the level of professionalism of the staff there. These are complex projects, and to be able to communicate with people who are really our professional peers was just not only made the project possible, but made it fun. We were able to have really substantive discussions about the meat and potatoes of the project. And so I just want to give a shout out to them and to the people in Litchfield County. They've really earned your support. So I just want to put that out there. So thanks again. So let's start looking for pictures in all the wrong places. If you've ever taken even a passing glance at a law book, old or new, you'd say that law books are the wrong place to look for pictures. And for the vast majority of them, you're absolutely right. They're not very common. But that's precisely what made me interested in them when I first came across one of these law books with illustrations about almost 30 years ago. And that's why I began aggressively collecting them when I came to Yale with the help of some great law library directors, Blair Kaufman and Teresa Miguel Stearns, who is, I think, in the audience, I know is in the audience here. Thank you, Teresa, for supporting my obsession and being so supportive. So, but it's been a lot of fun. But illustrations have almost but not quite disappeared from today's legal literature. But centuries ago, they weren't that uncommon. There's so I want to start with our presentation here. Let me just start to share my screen. And here we go. All right. So here's a quote that really says a lot about my interest and the importance of illustrations in law books. This is from a book about Sir William Blackstone, one of the most important figures in the history of Anglo-American law. And what the author writes is Blackstone was deeply invested in what he thought of as the qualities of the heart related to law and justice. And this he reflected his own time, but he also prefigured the view that our conceptions of justice are felt conceptions, interconnected to our perceptions of the beautiful and the ugly. They're arrived at emotionally and aesthetically as well as rationally. And that's really the gist of why I think these illustrations are so significant and interesting. There's lots of ways to slice and dice illustrations in law books and law-related books. I'm going to stick with just two because we have a limited amount of time, but I want to look at images that convey authority and legitimacy, and also pictures that explain the law in all sorts of different ways. So let's get started. We're going to look at pictures of authority first. So one way, legitimacy and authority are big concerns in the law. You need to know, is this text authoritative if you're a judge or a lawyer, or if you're the person being one of the subjects, are these laws legitimate? And one of the early ways of conveying this was through a portrait of the monarch. I typically haven't considered portraits law-related illustrations, and I haven't aggressively collected them. But the more I've thought about this issue of authority and legitimacy, the more important they have seemed to me. This is one of the most beautiful manuscripts in our collection. It's a collection of what at that time were the new statutes of England. And this was a manuscript that was commissioned by Margaret of Anjou. She was the Queen of England, the wife of King Henry VI. And she commissioned this collection of statutes for their son, the Prince of Wales. And so what we have here is one of the 4 or 5 portraits in this manuscript of Henry VI himself. And it's a way of conveying authority. And the iconography in this image actually harkens back a lot to medieval iconography about King David. So it's looking back to not just to the throne itself, but to religion and the Bible as authority for this text. By the way, there's a whole book written about this manuscript by a woman named Rosemary McGurr at the University of Indiana. So here's a later English law book from 1518, a printed law book. This is actually a stock image of the King of England. And I've always liked this one in particular because somebody a long time ago drew a beard on the king. So, and along with some other doodles. So beginning, again, this is a way of conveying authority. Here's an example from the continent. This is the Corpus Juris Civilis, the bedrock text of Roman law, which is the basis for all legal systems outside of the Anglo-American common law system. And here we have this beautiful portrait of the Emperor Charles VI, the Holy Roman Emperor, decked out in his armor and everything. Again, a way to convey authority. And also it's a way he's signaling, I paid for this book. That portrait wouldn't have appeared there without his permission. In fact, he's credited on the title page you see on the right. So again, another way of conveying authority and legitimacy. Here's the Napoleonic Code, a deluxe edition. This, I believe, is the last law book I know of that has the picture of a monarch with the book. And this is a beautiful portrait. I want to show you the portrait to begin with of Napoleon. It's a technique related to mezzotint. And I just think this is a most extraordinarily beautiful portrait. If you look at the technique, mezzotints and prints like this, they have this glow to them. I mean, you can see the way they play with light. It's just a really, as a work of art, I just think this is a really stunning image. So another way that authority was conveyed in manuscripts and early printed books is what are called book presentation scenes. This is a this manuscript is the Constitutions of Clement V, part of the body of canon law that was in effect all the way till 1917 as the law of the Catholic Church. And I'm going to mention some other canon law texts, but just as an aside, if you're wondering why we have so many books about church law, canon law was an enormously influential legal system in Europe in the Middle Ages and the early modern period. It didn't just deal with things like heresy and the election of bishops, but things like inheritance, the validity of oaths, piracy, contracts, all these legal issues that canon law was involved with, usury. And a lot of the principles that we use today in American law actually derive from canon law. Innocent until proven guilty, beyond a reasonable doubt, all these things come from canon law. So with that aside, here's this initial here shows the Pope Clement V giving his blessing to this text, another way to convey authority. Here's a very early image in a printed book from 1477, and I'll give you a close-up here. Again, this is another canon law text, and you have here the Pope with his tiara giving his blessing to the author or the compiler of the text. Beautiful image. This was hand-colored at the time. And we actually used this for our holiday card at the law library a few years ago. Here's another book presentation scene. This one, the author, Ulrich Tengler, really goes all out. He's not just getting a blessing for the text from the king and his court, but from the Holy Trinity and the Virgin Mary and the whole works. He's leaving no doubt. Around the middle of the 16th century, these book presentation scenes become relatively uncommon. This is a different kind of book presentation scene from the late 18th century. And here you have a justitia, justice. She's bestowing the text on the monarchs. You see her on the left, she's giving the Siete Partidas, the famous medieval Spanish law code, to King Alfonso. And then she's giving Justinian's Institutes to Justinian. And here we're looking at a higher authority for law, not just the monarch, but the whole concept of justice itself. Different way of looking at justice. These are the statutes of Nuremberg from 1522. And here again, you see this city hearkening to the authority of Justitia and the angels and the coats of arms of the emperor and the other nobles for authority. This is an interesting image because this image is actually done by Albrecht Dürer, the famous German artist. It's a beautiful image. It's a woodcut. You would think it's an engraving by the fine lines, but this is, in fact, I had someone who's more of an authority tell me that this is Albrecht Dürer showing off what he can do in woodcuts. So just an extraordinary image and a different way of invoking the authority of the text. And this is Nuremberg from 40 years later. And again, you see these really gorgeous images. So this is the city, and the city itself is paying for these. They paid a really fine artist to render these images. They're subsidizing the text. It's really not just a way of invoking authority, but a way of showing off. Nuremberg was an important center of in the German Renaissance, and you see they're showing off their prosperity, their culture in this. You know, something quite different from what you see in law books today. You don't see the state of Connecticut or Texas or the U.S. government doing anything come near to this in their law books. I mean, they're pretty drab by comparison. And even in 1737, excuse me, you see here again, they're still going all out with these really stunning engravings. There's a scene of the city at the bottom. The figure on the left is Charles VI, the same guy we saw decked out in armor a few slides ago. Again, different way. And you see the images of the, they're invoking religious images, not just secular. Again, you see rulers associating themselves with the image of justice as a symbol of their authority, that they're dispensers of justice, that they derive their laws from a higher authority. It's not just the king saying, here's what I want. And this is another really beautiful image, Justitia there with the coats of arms. And the detail on this I want to show you is also quite interesting. Around the Latin, around the sword and the scales, this is a translation. Bad men hate to sin from their fear of punishment. Good men hate to sin from their love of goodness. So there's a powerful message here about rule of law and not just authority here. Again. So here, this is another one of my favorite images, a really powerful image. And this is Justitia talking back to the figure of authority, in this case, the executioner. This book by Cesare Beccaria on crimes and punishment is one of the landmarks of the Enlightenment. Beccaria wrote this book as a denunciation of capital punishment and advocating for reform of the penal system. And this image is an image that Beccaria himself conceived of. He's not an artist, but the idea behind it is completely his. And you see there Justitia turning away from the executioner with the three heads saying, no, 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 this is not, capital punishment is not justice. And she's looking down at this pile of tools on the ground, the shovel and the other implements, looking at that as a way to reform people who have broken the law through work and through training them and so forth. So just a really powerful image about justice and its authority. Another way of invoking authority, the author himself starts becoming a symbol of authority and legitimacy. And this image is the very first portrait of an author in a printed book, and it's a law book by Paolo Attavanti, who was a monk, an Italian monk. And so this image here is actually the granddaddy of all the book jacket author photos that we see today. That's where it began, right there. These images of authors start conveying authority in a different way. Here, it's not the monarch, but the author and his the bookshelves there symbolize his learning. This is and the law itself is a learned profession. So here's a different way of conveying authority. And images like this are also really fascinating because they show a lot about the history of the book. You look at the bookshelf and you can see how books were shelved that time. You see most of them were shelved with the foredge facing out, which is not the way we shelve books today, but putting spine labels on books was at that time a fairly recent innovation. Also, you see them with their clasps. So then again, just a history of bookbinding and the book in general. Here's another author portrait here of this Italian bishop who was a judge in canon law courts. And again, it's a wonderful portrait. But also the whole you can see all his writing implements and the way the books are bound. You can see that if you look closely, the titles of the books are written on the edges of the text block because they were shelved that way, laying down. So anyway, just another aspect of book history. Here's an English a book of case reports from the 17th century with this very sour-looking Sir George Croke there, sober as a judge. That's there you get the image. This was a way of conveying authority also for a genre of text, these case reports, that were sometimes quite dubious. Printers were, at this time, often would go and scavenge notebooks of dead judges and publish things that the judges themselves never intended to publish. So putting a portrait here is kind of a way of conveying authority and also making the book more sellable. I mean, these were objects of commerce also. And this is interesting because I looked at about 50 portraits we have of English judges in books, of 30 different judges, 50 different portraits. This is the only one that has printed books as part of the image. And that's kind of compared to the jurists on the continents, there's many, many portraits like this in that show them with printed books. So I just thought that was odd. Here's just a generic portrait of a lawyer. This is a law dictionary with a bookshelf behind him. Much like what we see today on TV, you know, lawyers who advertise, they're always standing in front of a bookshelf showing how smart they are. So it's an antecedent to that. And the book itself becomes an image of authority. Here's Justitia with a whole library of law books behind her. You know, this idea of the book itself as the receptacle and as an icon of authority. You know, today we talk when you get prosecutors who are aggressive, they say they're throwing the book at the guy. So they're just interesting that transformation. Even today, here's a kid's book, and there you see the book is conceptualizes the whole, you know, stands for the idea of the law. So before we get into the next section, this is an author portrait, extraordinary because it's the most unflattering portrait of a legal author that I've ever seen, deliberately unflattering. This portrait, this image comes from the Liber Sextus of Boniface VIII, one of the most important foundation texts in canon law. Boniface VIII, who you see on the far left there and also in the middle, there's two scenes from his life here. He was a canon lawyer and a very prolific legislator, but also known as a ruthless politician. And I want to explain what's going on here. On the left, Boniface is standing behind Celestine V, who was the last pope before Benedict XVI to resign from the papacy. And he was elected to be pope because he had a great reputation for piousness, but he wasn't very, he was poorly educated, and he was really out of place in the papal bureaucracy. He was, you know, people just had their way with him. There's even a story that he built a hut inside the papal palace to maintain his ascetic lifestyle. And Boniface built a tube in the wall of the hut and would whisper in it, Celestine, Celestine, this is God. I want you to resign. And you see here, you know, Celestine with the dove of the Holy Spirit above him, but behind here's Boniface with a fox pulling the papal tiara off of Celestine's head, and Boniface became the next pope. So in the other scene, it's Boniface as the prisoner of the Colonna family, and they were bitter enemies. At one point, Pope Boniface conquered their hometown and razed it to the ground. And like the Romans did at Carthage 1,000 years earlier, he scattered salt over the entire city so that nothing would grow there again. But the Colonnas got their revenge. And this shows them taking Boniface as a prisoner. And he died as their prisoner, possibly tortured to death. And how this image came to be in a law book of Boniface's laws is beyond me. It's an interesting story. This book itself actually has been censored. There's some parts that are blacked out because of the Inquisition. Why they didn't black this out, I'm not sure. Anyway, a great story. Pictures that explain. This is a manuscript, a medieval manuscript with this image is known as a tree of consanguinity. And this is a way of diagramming family relationships. And this is relevant for all sorts of domestic law. For instance, what legally constitutes incest? If you're marrying your third or fourth cousin, is it legal or not? Things like inheritance and all sorts of issues like that involving family relations. This is a really useful diagram. And it was the most common illustration in law books for a couple of hundred years. This here is a tree of consanguinity. This is actually the very first illustration that ever appeared in a printed law book in 1473. So there's lots of these. I've got hundreds of them on our Flickr site you can take a look at. Here's one. This actually uses the same imagery, borrows from a famous image known as the Tree of Jesse, which is basically a diagram of the genealogy of Christ. So again, you see kind of a godlike figure standing behind. Here's a different sort of image from a French law book. Here's a Spanish one, more of an architectural rendering. Still does the same thing. And this is probably the last one. Interestingly enough, American law books hardly ever had trees of consanguinity, but the very last one I found in any printed law book is in the civil codes of the state of California from 1872. And there you see a California scenery at the bottom, a really pretty image. This image here is basically an attack on the Catholic Church's conception of consanguinity. If you look at the tree on the left, which is cut down, that's the more liberal calculation of degrees of consanguinity that was common in German law and Roman law. And what you see here in the image, the popes, Gregory the Great and Alexander II, have cut that down and replaced it with the Catholic Church's much more restrictive scheme of consanguinity. And basically, the author is saying this is a shakedown scheme. Basically, this is the way the church gets money out of people when they have to ask for special permission to marry their second or third cousin. Just a really extraordinary image. I love it. And they use this tree motif to diagram other things. Trees of jurisdiction, tree of bigamy. I'm not really sure how this applies to bigamy, but it's somebody will have to teach me about that. Interesting. And this is from an American reference, a book on legal research. And basically the law tree here is a way to a system for doing legal research. And if you look close, there's a jillion different leaves here following from property and contracts and so forth. Here's another way of using illustrations to explain. This is the law book that actually got me interested in law books with illustrations. This is a book on water law from an Italian author from 1580. And it's about alluvion. So they're using, for instance, in issues come up, like if a river changes course and an island forms in the middle, well, who owns the island? And it's much easier to explain this with pictures than just with text, the text alone. It's applied geometry is basically what it is, applied to legal matters. So this is what got me started. Here's another book. Water law in particular makes a lot of use of images, especially Italian books. This is a book on the law of aqueducts with this really, I just love this woodcut image here. And it gives with the explanation on the left-hand side. This is a book from 1818, another Italian book on servitudes, which is the law of easements. And this one has an interesting feature. They're called throw-out plates. So this book has about 20 of these folded up plates in the back. But when you're reading the text, you can fold out the plate that applies to the text you're reading so you can see the illustrations, those illustrations, while you're reading the text. Really practical way of book design, and useful. Here's a different kind of explanation. This is a book of German agricultural law. And what this is a size chart for what size fish are legal to catch. And I love this image also because the fish have kind of these almost human expressions on their faces, but a useful way, a useful illustration. This is a whole different kind of illustration. This is a text, a product of this text is a product of the French Revolution. This the author is arguing for the reinstitution and the liberalization of divorce. If you look on the image on the left there, what the caption for the says, the guy's pointing to the shoe. It says, "You see this shoe? When it hurts my foot, I take it off." So it's kind of a metaphor for divorce. Really interesting. This is, I think, also a really interesting image explaining a legal concept. This is a book for high school students in Australia on Aboriginal land rights. And this illustration does a great job of illustrating two totally different concepts of property. The Aborigines on the left saying, this land is us. And the white settlers on the right saying, this land is ours. Really extraordinary for how it captures two totally different concepts about property rights. There are a few books that actually try and illustrate all of the laws, and this book is really there has never been a law book that more completely integrates text and image than this book. It's the Suction Spiegel, The Mirror of the Saxons, and it's a compilation of Saxon law that went through many editions. It was actually, the text was actually cited as late as the early 20th century as authority. But there are 4 medieval manuscripts that are illustrated. This is a facsimile of one of them. The original is in Germany. But the integration of text and image is really extraordinary. If you look at the images, they have these initials, and you see the same initials in the text. So it keys the illustrations to the text. And there's this very elaborate iconography in these images, the scissors, the hand gestures, the way if the legs are crossed, the head coverings, the clothing, all of these things are very, there is nothing accidental in these images. And I want to, one of them that's just my favorite, I'm going to read a description of it here that was written by the late great professor Guillermo Margadat. He wrote for a publication I edited when I was at the University of Texas. It's a great description. I can't do any better. Here he goes. This lady, in her undressed state, we cannot see from her scarf if she is married, is doing naughty things, very naughty even, because from the guitar that seems to float above her bed, we see immediately that she's offered her favors not to some decent knight or priest, but to a musician, to someone belonging to the scum of humanity, a hippie. The corresponding text declares that the lady has now lost her honor, but that this does not mean that she has lost her legal status or her right to inheritance. We are facing here a curious coincidence between the attitude of the Suction Spiegel and the commendable modern tendency to tell people that if they opt for a flamboyant erotic life, they will probably have to face a negative reaction from part of society, but that as a general rule, their rights will not be impaired as long as they do not link their sexual practices to criminal offenses. Thank you, Professor Margadat. Well, great image. This is the most heavily illustrated law book. It's a 3-volume set. It's the part of the Corpus Juris Canonici, the body of canon law. The illustration we saw, Boniface VIII, is from this same set. There's over 450 of these woodcuts illustrating every one of the laws that are set out in here. The two here I've highlighted at the bottom deal with the issue of loans and usury. Again, an issue important in canon law. No set of law books has been more heavily illustrated, printed law books, than this one. Here's another example of a law book that illustrates all the laws. This is Damhouder's Guide to the Criminal Law of Northern Europe, illustrated with over 50 woodcuts illustrating each of the crimes that are illustrated. And it illustrates a lot of the common crimes: assault, murder, robbery, counterfeiting, but actually has some laws that are illustrated that kind of unusual today. This is the crime against of grave robbing, you see illustrated here. This is the crime, basically consensual adultery is what this is. On the right, you see the husband who's tending the fire, and he's paying no attention while this wife and this other guy have at it on the other side of the screen there. So interesting. This was an extraordinarily successful law book, though. It went through 37 editions over a period of 100 years. There were, let me see on my notes here, I think 23 of them were illustrated, and we've acquired actually 17 of the 23 illustrated editions of this book. And here's the last one. Here's the crime of throwing your refuse out on pastures, emptying your chamber pots on people passing by in the street. So you see the guys fleeing there. So anyway, interesting thing. Since then, there's been no other attempt to illustrate an entire code until this book here, until this illustrator, Joseph Emard. So this is the French tax code. And a tax code, really the most boring, dull kind of text you can imagine. But Emard illustrated this with hundreds of illustrations. Here's the law about hiding of assets. You can see there the wife looking at her husband's jacket while he's asleep. Emard has this wonderful sense of humor. And they wouldn't be nearly so funny if they were just the illustrations by themselves. But you have this deadly serious, dull, droning text side by side with it. It's kind of an interesting commentary on the text. Here's the about the law on the tax on balconies and other protruding structures. So very French sort of humor here. And depreciation of assets. There you go there. That's his illustration of that. And the book has, here's a illustration on taxation itself. You can see kind of interesting commentary on taxation. And here's how he illustrated. The book has 3 big sections. So you can see the taxpayers here losing all they own until finally the taxpayer has taken everything and they've left with nothing. So there you go. And he also illustrated the penal code. And this is a great illustration on involuntary manslaughter. So it's and there's gobs of these. I wish I could show you more. There's not enough time, but Emard was he was a genius. I love this guy. So here's a different use of illustrations to explain. This is from the litigation, from the briefs on the litigation involving the Bell telephone patents from 1887. Really, patent law is a great way. A lot of patent law briefs use illustrations. This is a really innovative use of illustrations. This is from Mexico City from 1899. And this attorney, Serralde, he was defending a guy against charges of murder. And so what he did, he actually got actors and a photographer, and basically he used these to show that the prosecution's theory of how the murder took place were physically impossible. And really, and for that time especially, a really extraordinarily innovative use of illustrations in legal argument. Here's a modern use. This is the litigation over the baker who didn't want to sell wedding cakes to the gay couple. And this amicus brief is basically just arguing that cakes should be considered as works of art. And so they included in the amicus brief color images of these really fancy wedding cakes. Here's another, this is a great one. This is another amicus brief that the West Virginia ACLU filed in a case. The guy on the right, the picture on the right is Bob Murray, a West Virginia coal magnate. And he sued John Oliver and HBO for making fun of him on John Oliver's show. And as part of their brief denouncing what they called this ridiculous lawsuit, they one of the things Murray's complained about was that John Oliver compared him to Dr. Evil. And they said, well, but you know, truth is a defense against libel. And so they put pictures of them side by side, and they actually, in the footnote, point to a quote from Dr. Evil in the movie that's almost exactly the same thing that Bob Murray said on one occasion. So it's, if you get to, we have this brief on our scholarship repository. It's a masterpiece of legal writing, one of the most fun pieces of thing. They just take this lawsuit apart. Really great. Explaining courts is another way. This is an early illustration, just explaining who all the participants are. You know, court trials are like dramatic, you know, they're like a play where people have their roles, and this is basically stage direction. And again, you can see here the notary, you can actually see the tools that were used at that time to take notes. Here's a thing from Germany, from diagramming all the participants in a court and who they were, where their roles and where they stood. And here's another one from Germany. This actually from the Nuremberg war crimes trials. And this was a seating chart for the judges, so they could tell who was who and where they were sitting. So finally, wrapping up here, a explanation of what lawyers are. This is a rather a very satirical and unflattering look at lawyers, and I'll show you the details so you can make it out. So here's the client sheep who's coming to get help, and all the bear and the wolf and everybody are planning what piece they're going to take out of the sheep, the poor innocent sheep there, the client. But again, here's on the right here, you see also these details that show something about how record keeping was done, a filing system using hooks. So again, and to end up with a more complimentary look at lawyers. This is St. Ives, the patron saint of lawyers. St. Ives was a parish priest in Brittany in the Middle Ages, and patron saint of lawyers and abandoned children. And so you see him here reaching out his hand to help the widows and orphans and the poor, and turning away and rejecting the rich man and his money. Another image we used on our holiday card one year, and a really powerful image for what the mission of law is, and lawyers in particular, is all about. So there's lots of it. I want to mention real quickly, this is the catalog of our exhibition. One of the exhibition we did, this is the one we did at the Grolier Club with Mark Widener, and I also did an exhibition at the Law Library, a companion exhibit with my wife, Emma Molina Widener, called Around the World with Law's Picture Books, where we had illustrated law books from 6 continents. So that was a great thing. But Greg Talbot, the publisher of Law Book Exchange, asked me to mention that if you purchase the catalog from him now and mention today's event, you'll get a 20% discount and free shipping. And just as a point of clarity, I do not make a penny off of the sale. So there's no, anyway, it's a great book. This is the book that won the prize for us from the American Association of Law Libraries. So all of these images are also on our Flickr site. And I want to show you for people that aren't lawyers and just like eye candy, real quickly, there's lots of beautiful images. Lately, I've been on a tear about printers devices. These are kind of trademarks for printers. Some beautiful images, initials. I've got a few hundred of these engraved and woodcut initials, suitable for t-shirts, coffee cups, holiday cards, and woodcut decorations. So I urge you to, if you're just looking for something fun to look at, take a look. And thank you once again. So I'm going to stop now and see if I can stop sharing my screen here, and look forward to your questions. So thank you.
All right. Mike, thanks so much. That was really fascinating. And we've already got some great questions rolling in. So I'll just start with, I'll start with this one. Were these so this is about the images that were appealing to authority. Did they ever, were they ever contested? Like, did critics of a work ever think it was inappropriate to use this imagery?
Well, Beccaria's book was actually placed on the Index of Prohibited Books by the Catholic Church.
Oh.
So I think probably people, you can, if you look at some satirical images, that's where you see people, I don't know of any specific quote saying, that king or that jurisdiction has no right using justice on there. But you can see there's some dialogue, some conversations going on in imagery, especially in these books that are on the fringe of legal literature, which are really some of the most interesting genres, where justice becomes an image of satire and so forth, in children's books too. So yeah, they do. You do see them contested in that way. It's not, an interesting thing about Justitia in particular is she's one of the 7 virtues. And I challenge anybody, including myself today, to tell which of the other virtues are. But Justitia is universally recognized. I mean,
right.
not just in the Western world, in Japan, in Africa, right. Its ubiquity and its legibility is really extraordinary. So it's a lot of people make use of it. So
right. All right. So again, just anybody who does have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A or the chat feature. We have lots of questions, so I'll just keep going. Okay. Are there any parts of law books that you have not found any illustrations for?
Well, I think some, private law, some of that is hard to illustrate to begin with. Although there are a few examples, but they're not like crimes, a murder or something like that are easy to illustrate. A contract dispute is a bit hard to do. I have seen some illustrations of that, especially in textbooks and more modern textbooks, actually. There's actually a coloring book that 2 law professors have put out on secured transactions called Color Me Secured. And so there is a way, there are some genres of law books that it's less common to find illustrations.
Right.
I think, so yeah, I'm trying to think, a lot of legal dissertations, that's a huge genre. Very few of those have illustrations. Case reports in general don't have, there are some interesting exceptions, but for the most part, you don't find illustrations in case reports.
Huh. All right, I'll just keep going with more questions. Are these the antecedents of the carvings on the Wall Street side of the Yale Law School?
I think the guy, the author, I can't remember the name of the guy who did this, who's a guy is a genius. he may have looked at some of those. I know that if you look at the stained glass, for instance, in the on the stairwell and in the dining hall, some of those images are taken directly from printed books. The guy who did the sculptures, I'm not sure. They're great sculptures. He actually is very, in some ways, very akin to Joseph Imard. I mean, the guy has this wonderful sense of humor. There's apparently, I still haven't seen, I have to track it down. There's supposedly there's a statue. One of the statues on the side shows a guy taking an oath. And if you get up high enough in the building to be able to look behind him, he has his fingers crossed behind his back. So
really,
yeah. So they're great.
Oh,
But no, I don't know. He may have.
I'm gonna do my best with the pronunciation. Do you know how do you pronounce it? Suction Spiegel?
The Suction Spiegel?
Suction Spiegel, was that first printed by a woman? Do you know? That was a question from Kate Peck.
I don't think so. It was printed a number of times. The printed editions, none of the printed editions have illustrations. None of them. They were these only, and there's a lot of manuscripts, medieval manuscripts, that have no illustrations. There's only 4 that are known as the codices picturati, the pictured codices. One of them, and we have facsimiles of all of them. They've been published. One of them still shows the signs of being singed in the firebombing of Dresden, actually. But I don't know. There are some interesting. We have the first law book printed by a woman, by the way. It's the Institutes of Justinian, printed by Charlotte Guillard, who was the widow of 2 different printers in Paris. And she went on to have a long career as a printer on her own, a long and very respected career. You see authors, she printed just serious books, law and theology, and you see the authors in the prefaces praising her for her patronage of learning. And she had a serious reputation as a book publisher, as a woman on her own. A really extraordinary figure.
Yeah, that's really cool.
So, but no, I don't know. That's my answer to that.
That one. All right, let me ask this question for Margaret. The images appealing to authority sound a lot like one of Aristotle's 3 appeals, specifically ethos. And all 3 appeals seem to be present in your presentation: ethos, logos, and pathos, right?
Yeah. I don't know my Aristotle, but I would be shocked if that's not a part of what's going on in the people who conceive of this. I mean, because these people were steeped in Aristotle and the classical authors and stuff like this. So I'm certain now that I'm told this, that's part of what's going on. This was part of the cultural language of artists and authors. I mean, a lot of these authors, these jurists were very much Renaissance men.
Right.
I mean, they weren't just legal scholars. They were they wrote literature. It was so I'm sure that's what's going on. I'm certain of it.
So this is a fascinating question I'm curious about too. Were illustrations ever possibly useful for explaining the law to defendants who were illiterate?
I don't know. There's some interesting examples now. One of the things we collect is law-related children's books, and a lot of them are moral tales and things. But one of the genres that I think is really interesting, there's been a few coloring books and other things that have actually been they're prepared for children, pretty much in the United States, although I know it's been done in Australia and New Zealand, for children who find themselves in court. And it's a way to explain to children what's going on in a situation that's they're probably pretty scared.
Wow.
What's gonna happen to mommy and daddy? Why is the judge, who is this guy asking me questions? So it's a way to explain a scary and complicated system to children in language that they understand, and almost always with pictures. And they can even sometimes they can color a picture of the courtroom and the judge and all this. But it's an interesting genre, and that's something I've talked with students of asking them to do more of this, because it seems like nowadays there's more than ever a need for things like this. You look at what's happening on the border.
Right.
So anyway, I encourage people to, if anybody's interested, and that's one reason we collect these things as examples. So actually, there's some people that have used them for precisely that purpose. So, but as far as earlier, that's an interesting, that could be one of the motives, but it's not clear to me. Part of the thing, I collect these things so that other people can ask interesting questions. Like, that's a great question.
More questions to ponder. That's fascinating. This is a question from Barbara. There must be cases when art about the law is the subject of the legal case. For example, Du Maurier may have been sued for his satire. Are there case books that would need those images so that readers could understand what the case was about?
I think there's something like that I might have acquired not too long ago, and now I can't remember. I know something a little bit similar. One of the very few illustrations that appears in early United States Supreme Court cases is a counterfeit case. So they showed the counterfeit bill, a little image of the counterfeit bill. I'm not sure. I think there are some. I know I bought some things that are. We do have I bought the statutes of the Artists Guild of Rome. That's kind of an indirect thing. It doesn't really have pictures, even though it's about artists. But wow, I have to go look now. It's a great question. I'd love if I find one. I don't know. I don't have any more money to spend before I leave. But I'll tell somebody else to buy it.
Buy it, yeah. All right, I think we've got a few more questions. Again, if anyone has them, drop them in the Q&A. One from Jay. Yeah. Well, yeah, we'll just do maybe, let's say 2 more questions. How does that sound?
I'm all yours. I'll answer all the questions you want.
So here's a question from Jay wondering, was the Civil Code of Louisiana issued in 1825 and based in part on the Napoleonic Code Illustrated? I don't know if you're familiar with that civic code. It was not illustrated.
No, it wasn't. And that's almost all codes like that weren't. That's yeah.
Another fun question. Do you know if the illustration where in the lawyer in the Mexican case where he hired the actors? Do you know if he won his case?
I think he did.
Did it work? He did. It worked.
There's a publication about it. The guy, his client, was a very unsavory character, by the way. He was a colonel, but basically he was like a hitman for Porfirio Diaz, who was the Mexican dictator at the time. He was a thug, but he got a good lawyer.
He got a good lawyer.
Yeah, the guy was, I believe he did.
Excellent. All right. I think that wraps up the questions from everyone in our audience. So, Mike, thank you so much for illustrating this topic for us, quite literally.
Sure, my pleasure.
Again, this was absolutely fascinating. And thank you so much for answering all of our questions. Thank you everyone at home for joining us tonight. I hope you all start thinking of your own life in sort of these illustrated ways. It's just like a fun way to to convey information through illustration.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. This was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it immensely.